Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Happy to have you guys in here for another episode. Titans fans not happy, Greg, because the football team again refuses to win a game, but they have another opportunity before their Week 5 bye to go to Miami, where they had success last year, and try to do something pretty improbable yet again.
Yeah, I mean it's at some point you're not sure exactly what to say. The team has talented players. Um, Obviously we can talk about specific things.
Right.
Uh, you know, no one can predict what the future will hold. They're 0-3. I don't think anybody thought they were Super Bowl bound anyway. But there's a part of me when I watch them on tape that feels like, and I'm not, I've done this a long time, so I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic when I watch tape. But I feel like that this can be turned around. When I say turned around, that's a relative term. Like I said, they're not going to go 14-3. We know that. Um, but I feel like, I mean, defensively, I thought there were some issues this past week, but I don't think they have bad defensive players. Offensively, obviously the O-line is a work in progress, and who knows if there'll be some changes. Obviously, they benched Petit Frere after he just got a really bad set against Egnigbare, who then sacked Levis literally before he could plant his back foot. So there's obvious things that are not working, but I don't feel like this is a bad team. You know what you know what I mean. You've
Yeah,
been
no,
watching,
we're basically having the same conversation here locally for 3 hours a day, right, Greg? Because I
right.
mean, there's one score games all over the place. 30 games decided by one score, 8 points or fewer so far through 3 weeks. So it does feel like that the Chicago game was in their hands until he literally gave the game away at the end of it, and they had the
Well,
special teams flub.
I mean, they had two block punts in each of the first two games. And again, we don't know how those games would have ended without the block punt. We can't sit here and say, well, they would have won. We don't know that,
Yeah,
but they certainly had a very good opportunity to win each of those two games without the block punts. And then the
yeah,
conversation, see, those two plays have nothing to do with Will Levis or the defense.
right.
And if those plays had not happened, Levis and the defense would have played exactly the same way in these games, but the conversation would be totally different, as you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, the maniac moments that are easy to highlight on social media have basically defined this team optically. But
I mean, I'll give you a great example. And I know we want to get back to the Titans, but you and I often discuss, off camera that, hey, to mention some other games here and there.
yeah,
You probably saw the Eagles Saints game, and you saw in that Goddard 61-yard touchdown that the Saints defenders ran into one another.
yeah,
Okay. That allowed the Eagles to win that game. Okay. But now, even if they had lost the game, what Vic Fangio did and what their defense did would still have been absolutely tactically brilliant, which it was, by the way. But because they won, we talk about it one way. If they had lost, what they did defensively wouldn't have changed at all, but we wouldn't be talking about it that way. So you know how that goes. That's why I made the point that those two block punts don't change anything about what we're seeing from the offense or the defense. And they could have won each of those first two games, but just the nature of the conversation then would be totally different, even though the offense and defense would have played exactly the same.
absolutely. And so to go back to your point, because yeah, obviously I'm a Titans reporter. I'm a Nashville-based person. We do spend time on the local professional football team, but like you said, Super Bowl not what this year was about. This year, whether they ended up making the playoffs or ended up pushing for a wild card or whatever that might become of this team, this year is about Will Levis and the evaluation of the quarterback
Correct.
primarily and how they've tried to build things out around him. So that is the place that I would like to spend the most
Sure.
time on, Greg, because he has three more turnovers in this game. The pick six is the thing that I think is easiest to highlight because the interception at the end, obviously, he's just trying to get
Yeah,
something.
that's not really relevant.
There's nothing there. And then going back to the Enigbari sack, like he just doesn't have a chance. Like he's dead in the water as soon as the snap hits his hand. So that fumble, tough to pin on him as well. But the fact remains that he is turning the ball over at an exorbitant rate, and the turnover differential for them is a killer. But from when you watch him mechanically, processing within the scope of their offense, are you seeing sufficient enough evidence that this player is grasping what he is being coached on?
Well, here's how I would answer that. I would say that Levis at his core, and again, let's understand one thing. There's very few quarterbacks who are transcendent players who do not have weaknesses. Okay, so what I'm about to say, people might think, oh man, that means that you don't think Will Levis is any good. No, I'm going to tell you what the film shows about Will Levis. Okay. Will Levis obviously has a big arm, and he can make some really difficult window throws, and he made a few in this game. When he hit Boyd, I believe was on the first possession. That was a really tight window throw. But Levis at his core is not a high level timing anticipation thrower. He tends to be just a quarter of a beat late, just generally on certain throws. But like I said, for instance, that Boyd play, which I believe was 3rd and 9, he was a beat late with that throw, but his arm strength compensated, and he can compensate with his arm strength. So, he may never be one of those guys. Okay, now I can tell you that Patrick Mahomes is not a great, timing and anticipation thrower. Can he be at times? Absolutely. Josh Allen is not a great timing anticipation thrower. They have obviously other attributes, and if you don't turn it over, it changes everything. But that's not what Levis will be. Levis is much more of kind of an arm strength thrower than a true, subtle, nuanced player right now. Can he develop? That remains to be seen. The other thing which I think he has to work through, and I think this is very common for young quarterbacks, is at this moment in time, and this relates to the interception, is he's too often a predetermined thrower. I don't have time to listen to any coaches talk, at press conferences, but it would not surprise me if that's been said by the coaching staff, because it's obvious, that here's the play call, here's where I'm throwing the ball. And the Alexander interception was a clear case of that, because it was an empty set. They had I can't remember who he was throwing to, but it was the back. I can't remember whether it was Spears or Pollard.
On the interception, it was Hopkins.
Hopkins, excuse me, right. But it was an empty set. It was an empty set. So it was an empty set, and Alexander was playing off. So I'm sure he thought hitch route off coverage. That's the play. I'm throwing it. And it was actually not poor ball placement, but it was a predetermined throw. He was going to throw that ball no matter what. And I think that that's something a lot of young quarterbacks have to work through. It's not a fatal flaw. You can work through it. Again, we're not predicting the future. We're not pulling out our tarot cards here, but that's something that can be worked through, that often changes with experience. Whether it does or not, we don't know the answer to that. All I'm saying is you can't say, oh, this guy, you got to bench him, you got to do this just because of plays like that. That's something you can only get better at by playing, not by watching someone else play.
Yeah. And just Jair Alexander read it the whole way. It was a smart play by the corner. And even still, Hopkins, Greg, allows it's just like a 5-yard hitch route that he's running, but Hopkins allows Alexander to get inside of him.
He really can't do, by the way.
Right, which is a part of how that play, at worst it
should be an incompletion.
Exactly right. And that's something that's, that hasn't been talked about a lot here locally, but DeAndre Hopkins has said many times that he's still learning this offense. And I know Hop knows how to run a hitch. That's not my concern here. But there's a part of this that is still ongoing as far as them learning one another and learning each other within this new offense.
And that's the other factor.
Several times.
That's a great point, Buck. And that's another factor, is this essentially, methodology-wise, I'm sure the way it's taught will be very much like the Sean McVay offense. And that's not easy to learn. And that I know for a fact, because I know people who've been on that coaching staff. So, everybody is still learning it. Now, again, everybody's judged on wins and losses. That's not the point. But they're still human beings that have to go through and learn this. And then when you play and everything happens really fast, mistakes can be made by everybody. Same with the O-line. Obviously, the O-line did not have a great game. There were, I think, 7 sacks, and I think Levis is the most sacked quarterback in the league.
Sure is.
And I would say that very few have been on him. We know that sometimes he can stand there too long, and there's been a few where he has. But I would say this year, unlike last year, they're not the large percentage are not on him. This has been legit pressure.
Yeah.
And again, Bill Callahan, I'm sure, is teaching them way differently than they've been taught before. I mean, even Cushenberry, he's had probably more bad snaps than anybody would have guessed, given where he's come from. Now, does that mean all of a sudden he's a bad player? No, but he's probably trying to figure out some things as well.
Absolutely. And that will be something that the Dolphins try and take advantage of this weekend because, of course, on the offensive side of the ball, we know Tua's situation. We're happy that he is getting time away to get the medical attention that he needs with the neurologist and the concussion situation. We don't know if it's going to be Tyler Huntley or Skylar Thompson at this point, so probably not best to spend our time there. This Anthony Weaver defense, though, Greg, has been competent. Calais Campbell, has been productive certainly in this system, and it's not necessarily a Baltimore Ravens scheme that is being brought to Miami, but this is a coach who obviously has a lot
Right.
of experience coming to Miami, and you've seen that play itself out through the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually Anthony Weaver's been with, different coordinators in his short time as a coach. So, he hasn't just been experienced in one scheme.
Right.
In some ways, like Denard Wilson, who's been in multiple schemes as well. So, a couple of things just from a personnel perspective. Number one, they do play big nickel with three safeties, which, by the way, the Titans did as well, as you know, with Jamal Adams at times. I mean, he even played some snaps at regular safety when Hooker was out. But getting back to the Dolphins, so they bring in Marcus May, who's been in the league for a long time. I think you'll see that when the Titans go with multiple tight ends. You might even see it. I don't know what they'll do versus the pony package, meaning two running backs. They could go big nickel versus that as well. So what they normally do, Ramsey predominantly now is an outside corner for them. Kohu is essentially the slot. There's not many times this year Ramsey has truly played in the slot. There have been a few snaps here and there, but I'd be surprised if he plays a lot of snaps in the slot in this game. Their sub defense is almost exclusively nickel. They didn't play any snaps of dime versus the Seahawks this week. So they're predominantly high percentage nickel when they go to their sub defenses. The big question is rushing the quarterback. Can they do that with consistency?
And that's something that they're looking to Campbell for. Obviously, Jalen Phillips getting involved with that as well. So we will see what
Just as a quick point, last week they even lined up Seiler at a wide 9 on one play, and in the first half he beat the left tackle Charles Cross, and he sacked Smith from wide 9. So they're moving people around.
Yeah. Will Levis is intimately familiar with Zach Seiler after he threw him a pick six and tried to tackle him on the goal line last year. So hopefully mistakes like that can be avoided in this game for the sake of the Titans. So we'll see what happens there, Greg. I mean, they had no business winning in Miami last year. They have no business winning in Miami this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a game, quite frankly, we didn't discuss a lot about the Titans defense, and obviously I mentioned a moment ago about the big nickel. We'll see if they continue to do that. That whoever plays quarterback, you're going to see a very creative run game. So you must be prepared for all kinds of motions, all kinds. I don't want to say gimmicks because they're not gimmicks in the Mike McDaniel scheme. He's very creative in the run game. He's savant-like. They won't be gimmicks. They'll work off basic stuff. They'll just look different. So you really have to be prepared for that. And the last thing you can do is fall asleep, no matter who the quarterback is, because the last thing you can do is give up a 60-yard touchdown. Because right now the Titans have not necessarily shown that they're going to put up 30. So, you can't get in a situation where you give up an explosive play, for whatever reason. But the run game is going to be critical. Do we know about Mostert yet at this point?
I haven't seen an injury report yet because this is a later week.
Oh, right. It's a Monday game, so they don't have to do anything yet. Right.
Yeah. We'll get our first injury report today. So right now, Raheem Mostert, we're unsure of it.
Right, but obviously A-Chain is, he's big time and he's explosive, and they're going to get him the ball multiple ways. And you got to be aware of zone read stuff, regardless of who the quarterback is. I mean, neither one's Lamar Jackson, but they're going to run. If Huntley is the quarterback, he's an athlete. So you got to be aware of all the dimensions that come with the run game, because that's going to be the issue in this game. One of the main issues for the defense.
And certainly it was an issue for them this Sunday. 188 yards total
Yeah,
on
I
the ground
mean,
by the Packers,
they
5.1 a
displayed,
carry.
Malik Willis, and not that we're going to, obviously, I'm sure for a lot of fans, they probably, think Malik Willis should be the starter in Tennessee now.
I've
But the
gotten a
point
few of
is,
those calls, Greg, surprising to no
yeah,
one.
but the point is that Willis had a number of zone reads where no one was there. You'd have to assume they practiced it. I'm sure it just wasn't executed well. He obviously had a number of scrambles. You have to, when you play quarterbacks who have athletic ability and haven't played a lot, they're not going to see things with the needed clarity. So what do? They pull the ball down and run. That's what they do. So whether it's Hundley or Thompson, they're going to pull the ball down and run. And you got to be able to defend that. You can't let, I think Willis had two critical third down runs in the
Yeah.
game this past week, and you just can't let that happen.
Yeah, in particular on that initial scoring drive by the Green Bay offense. So we'll see what happens in Miami. I'll be there, and of course you can watch the NFL matchup show to get you ready for the Sunday slate of games. Although I would imagine, Greg, that Seahawks and Lions is a game that made the matchup show.
It sure did, and I actually did a piece that I think is going to be really, really cool, because I'll just tell you the general parameters real quick.
Sure.
So Mike McDonald in Baltimore last year played the Lions, and they killed the Lions,
Yeah.
something like 37-6. So, every coach, defensive coach, has certain tools in their pressure toolbox. So one of the blitzes of which he sacked Goff last year, he ran the exact same blitz against Bo Nix this year, the exact same one, and they sacked Bo Nix. So, there's certain tools he has, and you'll see those tools. And, that's why I was told years and years ago, coaches coach against coaches, because coaches have certain things they do. And, at this point in the season, they might make tweaks and adjustments, but you're not going to see totally brand new stuff that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and Ben Johnson versus Mike McDonald is going to be certainly
That's
a
an interesting
tactical
matchup, yeah.
to watch.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And these two teams have played each other a fair amount in the last couple of years. I know that the coaching staff has changed for Seattle, and obviously every team goes through changes on the personnel front every year. But Geno and Goff going up against one another, I know not necessarily going up against one another, but it's a really intriguing quarterback matchup. For Geno Smith, who's been one of the better quarterbacks since he's come to Seattle. No, I know neither of them necessarily lighting it up. Quarterbacks in general having a hard time working against defenses in the NFL right now. But both of these guys have thrown for at least 300 yards in the last couple of meetings. And I don't necessarily know that we're going to see both teams light it up that way this time.
No, and Seattle's offense is totally different now with Ryan Grubb, the former University of Washington coordinator there. They've changed dramatically from playing with multiple tight ends, which is what Shane Waldron did the last 2 years. Now they're a high percentage 11 personnel offense. They've been magical on first down. The numbers for Smith on first down through 3 games are just off the charts. He's 30 for 37 for 335 yards on first and 10. So they're throwing the ball extremely well on first and 10 out of 11 personnel. That's where those numbers come from. So it's a different offense, a different pass game. And if I had told you before the season started that after 3 weeks there'd be 5 3-0 teams and the Seahawks would be one of them, you probably would have said, have you seen your doctor lately?
I definitely am surprised by that, but this is why the NFL is fun every season, because every season is new unto itself, and you don't know who is going to be,
No.
especially in the early going. You don't know who's going to kind of emerge that way, and certainly, I'm sure nobody would have expected the Niners, for example, to have the start that they have. But when you have the amount of injuries that they do, it is of course difficult to work through. So, Greg, from a tactics standpoint, I know that you're in your piece, you're going to highlight that specifically, but any specific matchups that you're looking for beyond in this particular game? Because this Seahawks Lions game, I feel like, is going to get the majority of attention on Monday night.
I'm sure it probably will. I think the Lions pass game has not quite been as efficient through 3 games because every year is different, but we know that Ben Johnson does have really good schematics in terms of how he structures his routes and his spacing. I think that whenever you have the kind of speed that Jamison Williams has, there's only probably 3 or 4 guys in the league that have that sort of terrifying speed. We
Yeah.
know Hill's one of them. Shaheed from the Saints is another. I think Jamison Williams might fall into that category. That certainly changes the way you have to think about your defense. And I don't think that anybody will specifically match up to Williams because normally Seattle plays sides. Normally, again, maybe it changes. You never know with a specific player, but normally Woolen plays right corner. I really like what the Seahawks have done defensively as well because they have in both Witherspoon and the safety Jenkins guys who can play in the slot. See, Jenkins is not the same player just traits wise as Kyle Hamilton from Baltimore a year ago, but in the way he can be deployed in the context of a Mike McDonald defense, he can be deployed in a similar fashion.
Yeah. Speaking of Kyle Hamilton, Bills are at the Ravens this week. Ravens
Yeah.
finally getting right as far as the win column goes. Josh Allen has been an unholy terror for NFL defenses this year. He has yet to throw an interception in particular. This Ravens defense is kind of looking, it feels like, to find their footing as a unit. And I guess you could say the same of the offense. But anything in particular about this game,
Well,
Greg, that you're looking for?
I've been fascinated to watch the Bills because I think Joe Brady is doing a phenomenal job because this offense, Josh Allen looks like a different player. Now, again, you never know what the future holds. And could he come out this week and throw 3 picks? Of course, it's the NFL. These things
Yeah,
do happen.
sure.
But just in terms of what their pass game looks like, everything is quick rhythm. There's a lot of no read and one read throws. They're not asking Josh Allen to be Superman. And so now the special plays, instead of asking him to have to do that, all the time, essentially, once in a while you see it. I mean, this week on Monday night, he threw the touchdown to Kincaid. The week prior, he rolled to his right and made a ridiculous throw to Johnson, the running back down the field. But for the most part, this pass game is quick, it's rhythmic, the ball comes out. There's not a lot of progression reading involved. It's more sustaining than it is big play. I think through 3 games, Allen's longest completion is 33 yards. And it's, I think, to Johnson, the play I just mentioned, where he did leave the pocket. It's a different looking offense. And in many ways, it's better for a quarterback because it allows them to play efficiently and be comfortable. And Josh Allen looks like a very comfortable player right now.
Yeah, I would not have had Sam Darnold leading the league in touchdown passes, but Josh Allen's second right now with 7, and you can certainly see how much better and how much more efficient that offense has been for him, specifically in critical situations and red zone situations, obviously as well. That's been a really fun progression of. It's just fun to watch Josh Allen. Josh Allen is arguably, Greg. I know that it's not necessarily anything to do with scheme or tactics or anything like that, but I just love watching that dude. He's a menace out there.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen him in person or been next to him. I have, and he is a big, big man.
Yeah.
And I don't think you realize that until you stand. I mean, obviously he looks big on TV relative to other quarterbacks, but when you stand next to him, which I have, he is really big.
Yeah. Tough to stop.
And by the way, that's a trait. We talk about that all the time, Buck. That's a trait. We talked about that when the quarterbacks came out in this draft, that I had a chance to stand next to Drake May at the combine. He's a big man, and that's a trait.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that teams are looking for to. It's just how they maximize the
Yeah.
traits, of course, that is the process of quarterback development. Greg, I'm looking forward to if nothing else, I get a trip to Miami out of it. So we'll see what happens with the football team. But I appreciate your insights as always. Thanks for doing it, buddy. We'll do it again next Thursday.
All right, Buck. Thanks. Appreciate it.